On Monday, Senate Republicans released a starting proposal for another major pandemic rescue package. Here's what we want to do. Continue a federal supplement to unemployment benefits that is otherwise about to expire. Send thousands of dollars more in cash to American families. Keep funding the payroll protection program to prevent more layoffs. Subsidize rehiring to get laid off workers their jobs back and create new incentives for workplace safety. Give K through 12 schools, colleges, and universities funding to reopen safely, more money than the House Democrats have proposed. Support healthcare providers in the latest hotspots and keep supporting the race for vaccines. Provide common sense legal protections so that schools, hospitals, and other employers can reopen without being buried in lawsuits. That's what we put forward. $1 trillion for kids, jobs, and health care. A framework that is more generous in key areas than House Democrats' totally unserious proposal. A framework that could have kept the additional federal payments to unemployed workers flowing instead of expiring this week. But there's a fact of life here in the United States Senate. Takes 60 votes to legislate, so the American people cannot get any of the additional relief that Republicans want to give them unless Democrats at least come to the table. Either our Democratic colleagues come to the table or the American people won't get the help they need. That's why I said this week we come down to one key question. Will the country get the Democrats who showed up back in March to pass the Bipartisan CARES Act? Or will the country get the Democrats who showed up in June to block police reform and keep that issue alive through November? Unfortunately, 3 days in, it hasn't been a close call. The Speaker of the House and the Democratic leader refused to let anyone else speak on their side. I understand the Democratic leader is actually forbidden his own Democratic ranking members from talking and negotiating with their Republican counterparts who are spearheading the different components. So you see, Madam President, bipartisan member-level discussions might actually generate some progress. And progress does not appear to be something the leaders on the other side want. On Monday, the Speaker of the House claimed she could not wait to start negotiations. But then on Tuesday, she said her discussion with the administration, quote, isn't a negotiation. And then the Speaker said the appropriate thing for the Senate to do is pass a bill and then we can negotiate with them. Meanwhile, the Democratic leader is over here making sure that cannot happen. This is quite the partnership, Madam President. The House Speaker moves the goalposts while the Democratic leader hides the football. They won't engage when the administration tries to discuss our comprehensive plan. They won't engage when the administration floats a narrower proposal. They basically won't engage, period. The Speaker and the Democratic leader are playing rope-a-dope with the health, welfare, and livelihoods of American families. With benefits expiring, with the Paycheck Protection Program winding down, and millions unemployed. The Democrats are saying my way or the highway with a socialist wish list that was laughed off by everyone from journalists to economists the instant they introduced it. This is what reporters had to say about Speaker Pelosi's proposal back in May. Quote, the more than 1,800-page bill makes a long wish list for Democrats. Quote, neither this bill nor anything resembling it will ever become law. Even the Speaker's own Democratic members knew it was a joke. Privately, several House Democrats concede the bill feels more like an effort to appease the most liberal members of the caucus, end quote. Yet this is what they're holding out for. This is what they're holding out for. Let's recall some of the specific items. These are the things over which Democrats are blowing up negotiations and forcing a lapse in extra unemployment benefits. Tax increase on small businesses, taxpayer-funded checks for illegal immigrants, taxpayer-funded diversity studies of the legal pot industry, and their ongoing obsession with something called the state and local tax or SALT, which would be a massive giveaway for high earners in blue states. In other words, a tax cut for high earners in blue states. So let me say that again. Democrats are holding up help for struggling people over special tax breaks for rich people in blue states, an idea that's been criticized by economists from all sides. Republicans want to get more help to families right now, but Speaker Pelosi says let them eat salt. Let them eat salt. They also want to spend another $1 trillion bailing out state and local governments that have only spent, listen to this, 25% of the money we sent them back in March. State and local governments have only spent 25% of the money we sent them back in March. And the Speaker and the Democratic leader want to send them another $1 trillion. This is silly stuff, Madam President. None of it should be stopping negotiations, and none of it would be if our Democratic colleagues actually wanted to get an outcome. Let's talk about unemployment insurance. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that in these extraordinary times, it makes sense for the federal government to provide historic additional help on top of normal unemployment. Republicans don't want this aid to expire. Our plan continues it, but the Speaker and the Democratic leader say they won't agree to anything unless the program pays people more to stay home than to work. Prominent Democrats have publicly said they agree with our position. The Democratic governor of Connecticut has said he wants to continue the benefit at a more targeted level. Multiple members of the Senate and Speaker Pelosi's own House Democratic Majority Leader have all said in the last few days they're open to negotiating this. But the Speaker and the Democratic leader have cut all their colleagues out. They're standing alone, saying our way or the highway, and so people are going to suffer. I understand the Democratic leader said he felt offended when I noted that some people are suggesting Democrats' strange behavior is explained by politics. That some people think Democrats are behaving like national suffering would only hurt President Trump. Now, the Democratic leader himself pointed that exact accusation at various Republicans during the Obama presidency on multiple occasions. I know memories can be short around here when it's convenient. But more broadly, Madam President, actions speak louder than words. Democrats spent weeks shouting that the Senate should act on police reform, but when Senator Tim Scott gave them the chance, they blocked action. They blocked the Senate from even taking up the subject. And now, so far, the sequel. Democrats talked a big game about wanting to provide more assistance, but now it's go time. They show zero appetite for any bipartisan outcome at all. This is personal for me, Madam President. Kentucky is not finished fighting with the coronavirus, and the federal government must not be finished helping Kentucky. Laid-off Kentuckians need more help. Kentucky schools need more help. And under our proposal, Kentucky alone will receive $193 million for testing and contact tracing to fight the spread of the disease. This should be just as personal for every single senator. None of our states deserve the Democrats' rope-a-dope. No American family deserves it. Don't my distinguished ranking member colleagues wish they could be involved in robust bipartisan discussions with our chairman, like back in March, and not watching from the sidelines as their leader shuts down talks on TV? Do they really think the Democratic leader's tactics are serving the common good of their state? Republicans have put forward a framework that would do huge amounts of good for huge numbers of American families. If Democrats ever come to the table, we'll be able to bridge our differences and actually make a law.
Without objection.
Now, Madam President, the Senate will soon acknowledge a moment of silence for the 150,000 Americans who have now died from COVID-19, more lives than our country lost in World War I. This national tragedy is more keenly felt because it has not and cannot be properly mourned. One of the most devastating consequences of this disease is that it keeps us apart, even in death. There's no final clutching of the hand of a loved one, no funeral to remember them by. Grandchildren, wrapped in protective gear, wave goodbye from across the hospital room. 150,000 Americans have died, more than any other nation on God's green earth, more than our allies and more than our adversaries, more than the most populous nations and those with mere fractions of our wealth and power, and more, so many more, than the nation where this virus originated. We will debate the reasons for this ugly truth. We must, if we are to avoid compounding our errors and heaping sorrow upon sorrow as the virus continues to rage throughout our country. But now we spend a moment to acknowledge how much our country has suffered already. We have lost friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons. A beloved professor at Howard University, a civil rights pioneer, a renowned psychiatrist, a Brooklyn doctor, 62, on the verge of retirement, who in the early weeks of the crisis in New York worked day shifts at the ICU and night shifts at the hospital center across the street, before finally succumbing to the disease himself. We have lost so many in so short a time. Unable to grieve them in the manner they deserve, we respect this moment of silence, this moment of sorrow. So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that there now be a moment of silence to recognize the more than 150,000 American deaths from the novel coronavirus.
Without objection, there will now be a moment of silence to recognize the American deaths from the novel coronavirus.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, as the coronavirus, as COVID-19 continues to spread through dozens of states, our country is dealing with multiple crises at this time. Today, we learned that the most recent quarter was the worst on record for our economy. The problem is not new or surprising. Millions of newly unemployed Americans cannot go back to work, cannot afford the rent, cannot put food on the table. Small businesses are waiting to see if the federal loan program that kept them alive will be renewed. Parents are worried sick about their kids returning to school in the fall. State and local governments, who fought this disease on the front line when the Trump administration refused to give them help, are deep in the red and slashing public services, teachers, firefighters, and more. And throughout America, people wait days and days, even weeks, for the results of their tests, rendering the tests almost useless because we don't have an adequate testing program at the national level. This is the greatest public health challenge in a crisis and the greatest economic challenge in at least 75 years. We need to confront all of these crises. Senate Republicans hardly want to address any of them. They dithered for months and then produced a half-baked, half-hearted proposal of half measures, a proposal that their own caucus and their own president doesn't fully support. Just last night, the Republican leader confirmed that 20 Republican senators want to do nothing in the face of the historic problems we face. And because Senate Republicans couldn't get their act together, 2 weeks have now gone down the drain, and 3 months before that, because Republicans are wedded to a twisted ideology that the federal government shouldn't help people, even in the time of national emergency. As the country is about to careen over several cliffs as a result of the Republican delay, dithering, and disunity, our friends on the other side are now scrambling. It's dawning on them now, not a week ago, not 3 weeks ago, not 2 months ago, that we're facing a cliff on unemployment, although we face cliffs on other issues as well right now. Today, I understand that a few of my colleagues on the other side will ask the Senate to pass a reduction of the enhanced unemployment benefit from $600 a week to $200 a week, or even worse, a smaller percentage of a worker's wage than Republicans proposed in their bill earlier this week. An already stingy Republican proposal has gotten even stingier as the week has gone on. I've made it very clear why the proposal by the Senator of Wisconsin is terrible policy for 4 main reasons. First and most obviously, it would hurt the unemployed. 1.4 million Americans filed new claims for unemployment last week. The number is going up again. Our economy is still shedding jobs. Americans are losing their paycheck through no fault of their own. And Republicans want to take $1,600 out of their pockets every single month, give people who lost their jobs through no fault of their own a 34% pay cut? Shocking, inhumane, wrong. Second, it would exacerbate poverty. Our enhanced unemployment benefits have prevented nearly 12 million Americans from slipping into poverty. Republicans want to slash and burn that poverty-preventing policy. Let's have more people go into poverty. That's what this amendment would do. Third, it would devastate our economy. One of the few bright spots over the past few months has been consumer spending, in no small part because of these unemployment benefits go to those Americans who need to spend it as soon as they get it. No wonder respected economic forecasters project that the Republican policy on unemployment insurance would cost us over 1 million jobs this year and 3 million more next year. And finally, we know that this policy is impossible to implement. When our office called state unemployment offices to ask them about the Republican proposal, they said their implementation would be a catastrophe. One office said simply, this would cause chaos. So this is not a serious proposal. We all know it'll never pass the House and doesn't have enough votes to come close to passing in the Senate. Large numbers of Republicans will vote against it. This effort appears to be an effort to provide Republicans some political cover because they can't get their act together and force the country over these cliffs. We are trying to negotiate with the White House and would welcome negotiations with our Senate colleagues. But the reason negotiations are going nowhere right now is Republicans are divided. Who's leading the effort on the Republican side? Chief Meadows and Secretary Mnuchin? Is Senator Johnson and Senator Braun's effort to pass reduced unemployment benefits a real offer from Republicans or just a stunt? Leader McConnell has said that Democrats won't engage. I would remind him, he refuses to go into the room when Speaker Pelosi, Secretary Mnuchin, Chief of Staff Meadows, and I sit in there. Once again, Senator McConnell engages in Alice in Wonderland tactics and speeches and words. What he says is exactly the opposite of what is true. We're trying to negotiate, the Senate Republicans are not. Next, it's clear that Senate Republicans don't have a unified position on anything. The main thing we hear from Leader McConnell is that he would torpedo all relief Americans are counting on unless there's a giant corporate immunity provision attached. And he says he won't even negotiate on it. Who's holding things up? Who's standing in the way? Leader McConnell and his Republican caucus certainly at the top of the list. And President Trump is all over the lot. He himself called the Republican Senate proposal semi-irrelevant. When your own president says your proposal is semi-irrelevant, as Trump has said to the Senate Republicans, you know that they're tied in a knot and can't get anything done. president seems to endorse a different policy every time he finds a microphone. The one thing we're sure he supports is spending taxpayer dollars on a new FBI building to boost the value of his hotel. And yesterday we learned the president asked for nearly $400 million in renovations to the White House in the Republican COVID proposal. Seriously? The president proposes no help for Americans to stay in their houses, but wants the taxpayers to fork over nearly $400 million to help him renovate the White House? Simply put, negotiations with the White House and Senate Republicans right now are like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. We're trying to work with our counterparts, but it's immensely frustrating to deal with a negotiating partner that can't say what they support on nearly any issue. Now we're hearing the president and his representatives have floated the idea of a skinny bill to address one program to extend unemployment insurance at much lower rates, which hurts the unemployed. But while the nation waits, desperate for comprehensive relief, they leave everything else out. What about improving testing, where people have to wait in line, wait for hours and weeks, days and weeks to get their tests back? What about helping state and local governments who have to lay off firefighters and bus drivers? What about dealing with people who might be evicted? What about dealing with people who can't feed their kids? The list of issues goes on and on and on, and they're all immediate and urgent. So to have this bill, which is inadequate on unemployment benefits alone, cuts them to the bone, and not include any of the other issues in a hope to escape and then do nothing more, forget it. Won't pass the Senate, won't pass the House. It's a stunt. Even if the White House would agree to another extension of enhanced unemployment at its current level, which many, if not most, Senate Republicans will refuse to support, there are just too many things left out. Opening up our schools safely, healthcare testing, and reducing the wait to get test results, state and local governments, so much more. And even if the White House finally comes round to the position we should extend the moratorium on evictions, that wouldn't be enough. It makes no sense to extend the moratorium on evictions without helping Americans actually afford the rent. We can prevent landlords or banks from kicking Americans out of their homes for another few months, but then what? The same Americans would be 6 months behind on the rent and have no hope of making up the difference. So let's look here. Here's where we are. Americans are worried as this awful pandemic rages on. The lifelines we passed here in Congress to protect families, small businesses, renters, school kids, and so many more are expiring. And our Republican colleagues dither. We have a comprehensive, bold proposal. They have virtually nothing. Let's remember recent history. That may give us some hope that we can get something done. Back in March and April, Republicans were late to the game, just as they are now, and proposed stingy, insufficient legislation in response to COVID-19, just like they're doing now. Each time, Democrats were not bullied by Republicans into passing something that wouldn't work and be insufficient, but we demanded that our colleagues sit down with us and negotiate a bill that meets the needs of the American people. And that's what we did. And in the second, third, and fourth phases of COVID relief, our negotiations produced much better legislation that passed both houses with near unanimity. It's never easy, it's never painless, but it can be done. We just need our Republican colleagues to get their act together, roll up their sleeves, understand the gravity and breadth and depth of this problem, and negotiate with us in a serious way. Yield the floor. absence of quorum.